inside of academia, if I were to just turn the mirror at myself, inside of academia, we're here in Silicon Valley, work and the pursuit of more success, even if money is divorced from that, sometimes academic work is for sake of pursuing knowledge. Sounds to me like the same thing. In fact, it feels to me very much like the same mechanism.
So Andrew, here's what I love about you. First of all, you're willing to bring your own flaws and foibles to this conversation. Well, you know what? It's wonderful. And then you're really open and curious and wanting to understand. Because I can't tell you how many people I have met who really see addiction as some kind of otherness. But the truth is, we're all wired for addiction. And if you're not addicted yet, it's right around the corner. Do you know what I mean? Especially with the incredible panoply of new drugs and behaviors that are out there. So I love that you're willing to take a moment and really try to understand this, because it is we can all relate. And you're relating it to essentially your work addiction. Is right and apt. You just happen to be addicted to something that is really socially rewarding. You figured that out at an early age. Oh, when I do X, Y, and Z, all these people go, look at that smart kid, or whatever it is.
For me, it made me feel safe.
Okay.
I felt like, I just felt like this, and I paused there because it's like peace. I'm like, I can relax for a moment.
When you're talking about neuroscience.
No, or just when I feel like I'm on the right path.
Yeah.
And I'm onto something, or if I see something that I'm excited about, I'm like, I feel filled with, it must be dopamine.
Yes.
I feel flooded with pleasure, literally from head to toe.
Yeah.
And then my next thought is,
so true. You're a true act.
Okay,
you are, but you just got really got lucky with the fact that what you're drawn to is adaptive, essentially. And then your challenge is going to be that your life doesn't get too out of balance in the sense that you're 24/7 work and you don't stop and do some other things or think about it.
And my life admittedly is somewhat asymmetric. I mean, it has other components of physical health, etc., but it's somewhat asymmetric. So I got a dog. Although I talk about him an awful lot. So,
but the dog is good because that draws you out of yourself and a little bit away from the work. But again, I think the key here is for people who feel like they never experienced addiction, or they don't know anybody with addiction, or if they do, they don't get it. Just think of that one thing that is the most important thing in your life that you do that gives you pleasure and meaning and purpose, and then imagine if you couldn't do it.
Oh yeah, let's not talk about that.
Right.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, and you can send me a bill at the end. What is the most ridiculous sounding addiction that you've ever witnessed that was actually a real addiction along these lines? Because I think we all know the standard heroin pill. You've been I should mention, but they all relate to social media.
Okay.
You were featured in The Social Dilemma. It was a powerful movie. I think many people avoided seeing that movie because it reflects back on us just how addicted we all are and how manipulated we all are.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to change behavior much. I have to say that the movie changed my understanding, my perception, but not my behavior too much. If we look at addiction as a maladaptive thing, something that's making our lives worse or us less functional at work and in relationships, I could imagine a version of social media where it's making me more connected. I mean, this is a podcast after I post videos. This will show up on YouTube and elements of it on Instagram as well. So much like sugar or other things, I have to imagine that we need to regulate, not necessarily eliminate this behavior. So I want to talk about what that looks like. And I want to talk about what you've referred to as this narcissistic preoccupation that social media is creating, that we are all far more keenly aware of how we look and how we sound and how we are being perceived than we were 10 years ago.
Right.
So first of all, social media, how addicting is it really? And what is healthy social media behavior?
So
there's a lot of amazing, like the mean is shifted so high. And also people have amazing stroke paths to get here, coming from very little, accomplishing so much. But it's also the pressure, right? The way that this career was described to me the day I got my job was one colleague of mine, the late Meir, said, welcome to schizophrenia. You're never going to be able to complete anything without getting interrupted. That was partially true. I like creative buffers. And the other one, very successful scientist, memory management caveat, etc., said to me, I just remember, it's pinball. You never win. The best you can do is just keep playing.
Yes.
And I thought, wow, okay. And then you just go.
Right.
But I think that as we achieve more, not just academics, of course, but as anyone achieves more, there's the relishing in the accomplishment. There's often the desire for more, but there's also the pressure of, well, now I have to do this for the next 30 years, even though I love it. It's the pressure of, well, if the mountain is this high, then how do I get here and here and here, and then you start shoveling more dirt on so you can keep climbing. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
And I think that the perception of success is that there's a roar of the crowd and you cruise. You don't cruise. That they just give you more to do, or you give yourself more to do.
What I think is, at least in my life experience, I've heard this from other people as well, it's that prize that we're going for that if we get it is so unsatisfying. And it's the prize that we never imagined that we kind of go, well, how did that happen? But gee, that feels good. And so I'm very, it's curious, what's the...
It's like a mirage in one case. And it's it's almost like dopamine can create these mirages.
Yes.
That there's some place
That's
there.
right. And it's that pot of gold, right?
Constant dopamine.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think this, this really, I think, is related to our discussion earlier about this taking it one day at a time or paying attention to that, 24-hour period in your environment. I am absolutely fascinated by the ways in which we accumulate success when we do that, totally independent of the desire for success. It's really process-oriented. It's like, where am I today? How can I make today a good and meaningful day, a little bit better or as good as some other days I've had? Constantly tweaking and experimenting with this experiment that we call, our human existence. And when we do that in a way that's authentic and paying attention and value-driven, whatever our, values are informed by, it is very, very interesting how those days, again, accumulate and you find, wow, I guess I contributed something of value there, but I wasn't trying to do that. I think that's really, what I'm so amazed by is 20 years ago when I went to Stanford Medical School, 25 years ago, I was happy to just be a good doctor. I was like, I guess I'm just going to try to figure out how to be a good doctor and here to learn that. And now I see these medical students and they're wonderful. They're brilliant and they're on intention to all that, but they're like, how can I, write the great American novel, do my startup, go to Africa, apply for that grant? It's like, really, I was just trying to learn how to be a doctor. And I just say it's a lot of pressure on them, and it's also kind of a weird leapfrogging of the real way to accomplish something,
right.
Which isn't about like, how can I accomplish something? It's like, what can I do today that would be of service, right? And then finding that of trying to be of service, and not really going for recognition can sometimes lead to what people call success, although that wasn't what you were aiming for.
And it's all the more beautiful when it's not what you're aiming for.
Oh, so much better, so much better.
Now, I'm a big believer that when one can align their compulsion with some greater good,
yes,
the service to humanity or the planet or animals, whatever it is, that that's where the really good stuff emerges, because there's a lot of reciprocity there. The world starts to, you're supporting the world, and then it starts to support you in a way that feels very
and it comes back, right? And I mean, that speaks to like your generosity to me vis-a-vis my book. And I have to say,
I love the book. There's like, we're not in a business deal, folks. It's just purely that I heard Anna lecture in my course. I wanted to learn more about dopamine. She got me, asked her if she would come on the podcast. Turned out she wrote this amazing book. She sent me a advanced copy of the book. I read it in one sweep. It's incredible, and I love it. So just like the 8-year-old version of me, now the 45 version of myself, I can't stop laughing about the things I love.
Well, it's awesome, but I have to say I have been surprised by your generosity. It's not something I've encountered frequently at Stanford, which is a wonderful place.
Sure.
There is a general sense that if I give away to somebody else, I've lost something, which is not the right way to think about it, not how you are, and also not how the world works. Because when we give away to other people, we get back so much more, but it takes a long time, and it might not come through that path.
I never think about reciprocity.
Yeah.
But I was weaned by good advisors.
That's very nice.
Yeah. I think it sort of got drilled into me that the more you give, the better your immediate life is.
Yes. Yeah.
But I also don't have a long-term vision. I'm just excited about the book. I'm excited that people are learning about the brain and dopamine. I have to admit, having grown up in neuroscience, essentially, I did not understand that pleasure and pain were orchestrated the way that they are. I'm very mindful of it now.
Okay.
And it's changed a number of my behaviors. I know a number of people are going to have questions and want to get in contact with you. You are not on social media.
That's correct. Yes.
You're true to your ideology. That is
preparing something to share with the world.
This audio presentation of My Method by Emil Quee has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2011. All rights reserved. Chapter 5. Moral Power of Autosuggestion. Leaving for a while the subject of physical health cures. This audio presentation of My Method by Emil Quee has been brought to you by audioenlightenment.com. Copyright 2011. All rights reserved. Forward. Due to the tremendous success I've experienced with it, I felt a strong need to bring attention to Emil Quee's method of autosuggestion. It is, in my opinion, incredibly brilliant in its simplicity. Having heard the phrase, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better, many people have sought to improve on it. However, if you have read his book, they would truly understand Quee's method and realize why it is important not to attempt to improve it by adding specifics. Even Jose Silva, of the world-famous Silva method, in his attempt to personalize the phrase, only added an extra better to it. The subconscious mind, or our higher self if you prefer, knows what we need. There is no need, in fact, it is inadvisable to add specifics to our autosuggestion. The awesome power of the subconscious mind enables it to know far better than we consciously do exactly what our needs are. Why then should we get in its way? There may very well be needs that must first be met before we can even begin to work on the needs that we are aware of. During a particularly troubling period in my life, I kept a journal, faithfully entering my thoughts into it every night. I entered the bad occurrences as well as the good things.
Poly-Zion movement. Golda promoted that affiliation. When Rachel Hyanate, who was in the States as the Histadrut liaison early in 1928, seemed to support a move to separate completely from Poly-Zion, Golda answered her firmly. "I do not believe that an independent women's organization in America will be able to exist," she wrote in Yiddish. "No matter, I do not think that at the present time we should have one." She suggested that Hyanate rethink the matter and make it clear to the members. Golda's position in this debate paralleled the one she had taken earlier in regard to keeping the Women Workers' Council part of the Histadrut, positions that did not endear her to women who sought greater independence for their groups. Her response fit into a pattern that was to thread itself through her career. Unity in the movement, the party, the community, the larger whole, would invariably take precedence over individuals or special interests, including women's interests. Years later, in 1949, with pioneer women at a peak of membership, Golda, still pursuing wholeness, insisted at the organization's convention in Philadelphia that it combined with a now weakened Poly-Zion to form one large socialist Zionist movement. The women indignantly turned her down. When Golda came to work with the pioneer women at the end of 1928, the organization had grown from its 7-woman beginnings to 3,000 members and several dozen clubs around the country. Hadassah had 37,000 members and 285 chapters. The members knew of her. In her American years, she had crisscrossed the country selling shares in the labor Zionist newspaper, Die Zeit, and organizing Poly-Zion events. She stood out from other emissaries the Histadrut sent to raise money, men and women with thick European accents and an air of contempt for capitalist, soft Americans. "The entire movement here is worthless," Manya Sohat had complained back in 1921 about the American branch of Poly-Zion. Golda understood American Jews. She spoke their language, straightforward and to the point, in Milwaukee accented English and Russian-tinged Yiddish. She radiated American confidence and optimism, and audiences responded to her with warm enthusiasm. As her popularity grew, the process of mythologizing her in America began. Devorah Rothbard, later president of the Pioneer Women, remembered a cold, blustery day in Buffalo in 1929, when Golda came to speak and visited a labor Zionist Volksschule, where Rothbard's husband taught. The news spread like a flash that our own Golda from Milwaukee, who made Aliyah in 1921, had arrived as an emissary from the Histadrut. When Golda took over the class, she won the hearts of the young ones and the admiration of the teachers. The Detroit member Fanny Gorin was so thrilled when Golda kissed her that she didn't wash her face for a week. Golda traveled around the United States and Canada, through New England and the Midwest, spending long hours on buses and trains, going from one pioneer women's club to another, sleeping at the homes of members, sometimes sharing the bed of a chavara, if there was no other room. Wherever she went, she taught the women the latest songs of the Halutzot, brought them anecdotes and gossip from the yeshuv, and pushed them hard to meet the quotas needed to raise money for the women workers' farms in Palestine. If they didn't have the necessary funds, she sternly advised them to do housework for one another or make lokshen, noodles, and sell it. After 7 hard-working months in the States, she went to Zurich, Switzerland, to attend the 16th Zionist Congress, her first worldwide Zionist Congress, and also participate in a WIZO conference there. Her American stay had been a resounding hit. David Bloch, who toured with her for the Gewerkschaften campaign, informed the Histadrut leaders that Golda greatly succeeded, not only because of her personal abilities, but also due to her Americanness. The pioneer women collected $36,500 in their campaign, topping the previous year, in large part, they said, because of Golda Meyerson. While Golda was away, Morris resigned from his half-time position with the Histadrut Executive Committee. His departure reflects the sadness of his life. He was leaving, he informed the Finance Committee head, Shlomo Kablansky, on March 20th, 1929, largely because the work demanded more hours of him than he could give. In a separate letter, he also let it be known that he had not been paid for the full amount of time he worked. In an internal memo, with copies to Golda and others, nobody on the Finance Committee seemed to remember exactly what salary had been promised Morris. They did remember that Golda had requested he be given the job because she did not want him to receive a salary without actually working. Golda had been separated from her children for almost 9 months, about a quarter of 3-year-old Sarah's lifetime. She had moved to a larger apartment before she left, with an extra room that she rented to a woman who would also look after the children. Even with that help, the main responsibility for the children fell on Morris and Shana, who made no effort to hide her disfavor with a litany of complaints. She neglects herself and us. Her first duty is to the family, and so on. Her disapproval of Golda, however, did not prevent her from leaving her 2 oldest children in Palestine, while she went with her youngest to Battle Creek, Michigan, to train as a dietitian. Shammai, who was working in America again, encouraged her to join him, and when Golda suggested, "Perhaps you understand me now," Shana responded that her husband understands and helps me because he is all my life. She would not give her sister the slightest break. The land of Israel to which Golda returned in the late summer of 1929 had been shaken by a new outburst of Arab violence. Word of Arab disturbances had reached her and the other delegates in Zurich even before the Zionist Congress dispersed. There had been great excitement during the Congress earlier when the delegates united to form the Jewish Agency, a body that would represent world Jewry, Zionists and non-Zionists, in working with the British to establish a Jewish national home in Palestine. With much fanfare and celebration, Chaim Weizmann was elected the agency's first president. Then news of the riots arrived, smothering hopes and forcing world Jewish attention onto the Arab-Jewish conflict. If there was ever an event in the annals of the Yishuv which can be called traumatic, writes the historian Anita Shapira, it was the 1929 riots. 8 years had passed since the violence of 1921, a quiet period in which the Jews had become fairly complacent about Arab acceptance of their presence in the land. There had been skirmishes and tensions around the Western Wall in Jerusalem, an area sacred to Jews as the last remnant of the Second Temple, and to Arabs as bordering on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Islam's third holiest site. But these clashes had been brief. Suddenly, in the early morning of Friday, August 23rd, a quarrel over worship at the wall turned into bloody attacks by thousands of Arabs, spreading from Jerusalem to Hebron, to Sufad, and other areas across the country. The Arab throngs attacked with stones, sticks, firearms, and particularly knives, which they could conceal easily. A surgeon at Hadassah Hospital reported that the first group of victims he treated suffered mostly dagger wounds. And in Hebron, where Jews had lived alongside Muslims for hundreds of years, wild mobs stormed through town, massacring people with knives and hatchets, chopping off heads and hands. As they moved from house to house, they also raped and pillaged, and set fire to buildings with people in them. Among their victims were religious yeshiva students from the United States, who had no chance of defending themselves. Underlying the atrocities lay Arab fears of being displaced and a hatred of the foreigners settling the land, the same attitudes that had sparked the 1921 riots. In the years since then, although the Yishuv had not reached its expectations, a mass immigration of Jews from around the world never materialized. It did expand in many areas. By the late 1920s, the Arabs could say that the Zionists had gained strength and were striking permanent roots in the country. The violence lasted about a week, with neither the Haganah nor the British police handling it effectively. When it ended, 133 Jews and 116 Arabs had been killed, and 339 Jews and 232 Arabs injured. Golda returned to Tel Aviv from Zurich toward the last days of the riots. Like other Yishuv leaders who had been away, she headed almost immediately to Haganah headquarters. She also had a personal connection with some of its units. In Herzliya, the frontier town where her parents lived, Haganah members had used the Mabovich home to secretly store their weapons. In a trick of fate, Golda, the activist, was safely in Europe during the worst of the riots, while her parents, who had come to Palestine to be with her and Shana, faced real danger from the Arab villages surrounding their neighborhood. When the Haganah evacuated most of the people in their area, Golda's father insisted on remaining and standing guard at night, and her mother on staying home with him. A demonstration of courage Golda would refer to as a model for herself. On her return, Golda picked up her duties in the Women Workers' Council. Some 2 months later, she and Ada Myman began to lock horns again in a series of explosive meetings. The topic, once more, the ties between the Women Workers' Council and WIZO. The matter of the Women Workers' Council had come up at the WIZO conference in Zurich, but WIZO was left hanging as to the exact nature of its financial arrangement with the council. Golda opposed any WIZO involvement. She made her position clear at a meeting of the Histadrut Executive Committee on October 11th, and would not budge from it subsequently. WIZO, she argued, was part of the general Zionist movement. The Histadrut represented labor Zionism. Allowing WIZO to support women's training farms was tantamount to the Histadrut's ceding control of those farms to that group. Moreover, the pioneer women, who also raised money for the farms, would disapprove. While the men on the executive committee searched for a compromise, after all, WIZO money was not to be rejected lightly. Golda rammed her position through the Women Workers' Council. Furious, Myman and her followers in Hapoel Hatzair complained to Ben-Gurion. In a jab at Golda, he demanded that the executive committee be shown the minutes of the women's last meeting, which she had dominated. Golda Meyerson, it was turning out, was not quite as malleable as he and the other executives might have expected when they first invited her to head the council. Something else was also afoot. Ben-Gurion, Burl Katznelson, and others had been working intensely to effect a merger between the two opposing labor parties in the Histadrut, Adut Habodah, and Hapoel Hatzair, and a continuation of the battle between Golda and Ada could destroy the process. Nevertheless, the battle went on and on. At a Histadrut Executive Committee meeting in November, Golda asserted in a tone of finality that, as a formal matter, the issue is over. The Women's Council decided not to enter into an agreement with Wizo. Then, unaware, she slipped from the third person to the first. Because I think it is unnecessary and hurtful to the pioneer women. Incensed, Lyman and her supporters resigned from the Women Workers' Council, threatening to start a competing women's organization. Ben-Gurion became livid at the threat. Golda continued to hold her ground, and the strains among the three moved close to a breaking point in December. First came a bitter exchange between Ben-Gurion and Lyman, in which he labeled her group's threat a criminal act in the Histadrut. She snapped back that no one can think me less a Histadrut person than you, and I will do it if the executive committee does not come to a decision. Next, a convoluted debate raged about how to rearrange and re-elect the Women's Council Secretariat in such a way that the Hapoel Hatzair group that had resigned could be readmitted. Golda maintained that changes could not be made at this point. There are some things that cannot be undone, she pronounced. Ben-Gurion, seeking to pacify Ada after the previous outburst, turned on Golda, stating sharply that for the sake of peace, many things can be undone. Remez, quick to defend Golda, commented that in addition to peace, there is also justice and principles, to which Ben-Gurion shot back, you can compromise on many things for the sake of the institution's work, implying that Golda's obstinacy interfered with the Women Council's work. Finally, Golda and Ben-Gurion faced off. Irritated with her high-handedness, he asked, seemingly in all innocence, what the Women's Council had actually accomplished, particularly for city women. He knew, as did the others, that the council had done little to help city women, in spite of Golda's interest in them. Most of its activities had been on behalf of women's agricultural farms. Unfazed, as though unaware of the provocation behind Ben-Gurion's dart, Golda admitted that not enough had been done for city women, but she listed one by one the council's various other accomplishments and its plans for the future. Nobody listening doubted that this woman had complete charge of the situation and of the Women Workers' Council. 2 weeks later, she offered to give up that charge. A new reality had set in and begun to change the face of the Histadrut. On January 6, 1930, the long-awaited merger between Adut Habodah and Hapoel Hatzair took place at a convention that ended the next day in a joyous procession of delegates and leaders singing and dancing in the streets. The new united party, called Mapai, Mifleget Poli Eretz Israel, the Land of Israel Workers' Party, would be the largest party in the Yishuv, control the Histadrut, and eventually dominate the entire Zionist movement. In that context, it seemed pointless to Golda to continue heading the Women's Council with its turmoil intentions. She had been a delegate at the founding Mapai convention and then elected to its central board, one of 15 people given that authority, including Burl Katznelson and David Remez. She was one of only 2 women on the board, the other, Ada Myman, always her rival, yet always participating alongside her in labor movement projects. I have had the feeling for some time already that I am not succeeding, and I am not confident that I am doing what is necessary, she said at a meeting of the Women Workers' Council on January 9th, 3 days after the Mapai convention. Therefore, I do not see any possibility of continuing my participation in the work of the Secretariat. It was not an official resignation, but by late March, Ben-Gurion would write in his diary that Golda had informed him that she was busy with her children and could not work for the Secretariat full-time, nor was she proficient enough in Hebrew. These seemed strange excuses for someone who left her children for months while she traveled and who had been speaking Hebrew, albeit a weak Hebrew, at meetings. But Golda wanted out. Heading the Women's Council had not been a happy or successful experience for her. She left her position as Secretary of the Women Workers' Council in April 1930. Although she kept her affiliation with the group. A year later, the Women Workers' Council signed the financial agreement with Wizo she had so vehemently opposed. Golda's resignation from the Secretariat did not prevent her from receiving a prestigious new assignment to represent Mapai at the Conference of Socialist Women in London. Golda is conducting a highly successful campaign among the women workers of England, Ben-Gurion wrote to his wife Paula on June 23rd. Her talk created a great impression. The talk lasted only 5 minutes, but it so impressed the more than 1,000 delegates attending the conference that she was bombarded with invitations to speak at branches throughout Britain. Essentially, she reported to a Mapai meeting later, the socialist women knew nothing about Eretz Israel. They have heard only that the Jews are chasing out Arabs, and socialists need to oppose them. She suggested to her colleagues that they invite some of the women to Palestine, particularly those living in cooperatives. Showing them the Yeshuv's achievements would go a long way toward gaining their support. One visit to Israel is worth 100 speeches, she was to say. She had planned to return home after the women's conference, but pleased with her success there, Ben-Gurion prevailed on her to remain in London and attend the Imperial Labour Conference, an international gathering of socialist delegates. It was an important gathering for the Jewish leaders at this moment. After the Arab uprising the previous spring, the British government, under the Labour leader Ramsay MacDonald, had appointed a commission headed by Sir Walter Shaw to investigate the cause and effects of the disturbances. The commission results, published in March 1930, blamed the Arabs for the violence, but presented Jewish immigration and land sales as threats to them, and recommended restricting immigration quotas. Shocked and angered, the Zionist community viewed the report as a blatant retreat from the Balfour Declaration's promise of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. It came as a particularly bitter pill for the Labour Zionists, emanating as it did from the British Labour government. If Golda had expected Ben-Gurion to address the report in his speech at the Imperial Labour Conference, she was disappointed. He spoke for 45 minutes in broad, general terms, without particular sharpness toward the government, she reported. She, on the other hand, gave a blistering 15-minute talk in which she portrayed the painful condition of the Jewish community after the Arab attacks, and lashed out at the British proposal to curtail Jewish immigration. I do not trust the socialism of someone who convinces himself that socialism can exist, even though an entire nation does not have its own land, she told the many socialist leaders present. After she spoke, the Austrian socialist Friedrich Adler mumbled that he felt he had been personally attacked. A British Labour representative accused her of being too tragic, exaggerating the impact of the riots and the response of the British government. But Ben-Gurion was swept away. I trembled at her daring words, he wrote. Her speech shook the conference. She spoke with pride, assertiveness, bitterness, pain, and good sense. Although I had heard of her success at the Women's Conference and other gatherings, her speech was an enormous surprise for me. Gone were their differences from the Women Workers' Council. Gone, too, Golda's shame about an incident of long ago. When she still lived in America, David Ben-Gurion had come to Milwaukee to speak and was scheduled to have lunch the next day at the Mabovich home. Golda had gone to a concert with Morris instead of attending his lecture, and as a result the lunch had been cancelled. Someone who did not bother to hear Ben-Gurion speak should not have the privilege of having lunch with him, she was told. It broke her heart then that she had missed the opportunity to meet him. Now she had won what she had longed for since that day, and would continue to seek for much of her life. His approval. 8. Pioneer Woman. Ben-Gurion and the other Histadrut decision-makers would have liked Golda to go back to America immediately after she returned from London in the summer of 1930. She was the country's best emissary to American women. She resisted. For one thing, she didn't want to leave the children again. For another, this seems to have been when Shana was in the States studying nutrition, and Golda would have felt a need to keep an eye on her sister's children in Palestine, as her sister had cared for hers. Then there was the matter of Zalman Shazar, with whom she had developed a deep bond in the past few years. He had been slated to go to the States for a fundraising campaign, but a question had arisen about whether he could leave his newspaper position at Debar. She seemed hesitant to depart while he remained in Palestine. Golda's affair with Zalman Shazar was not unknown to the people closest to her, most notably David Ramez. Shazar and Ramez were good friends. Ramez and Golda had a tight relationship, although it might not have become romantic yet. A few months earlier, Ramez had written her an angry letter about her attachment to Shazar. He was jealous, or bitter because, romantic or not, theirs had been a warm, intimate tie. The letter used code names for people, a practice the two would continue. Gershon referred to Morris. Chaya was Golda. We always avoid talking about serious things, he wrote early in the letter. I don't know why, but first there was no opportunity, and then I don't want to cause a scene, and Zalman had the same feeling. Then he went on to talk about serious things. Golda, the trouble with you is you were raised on praises. No question you are successful. I don't question you in your social earnestness. You are not a mensch. For you there is no individual. It's only the masses. Particularly the way you act to your friends is unforgivable. His words echoed thoughts her friend Yossel had expressed long ago in Milwaukee. I don't believe Golda misses anybody, he had written to Morris. She addresses herself to all of humanity. To miss somebody means speaking to only one person at a single moment. Golda valued causes above friendships, both men contended, and her friends felt slighted. Actually, the current scene seemed a replay of Golda's youthful experience. Men fascinated by her, competing for her attention, and irritated at not fully receiving it, while she turned from one to another. Then it was Yossel and Dubinsky, now Ramez and Shazar. Morris always inhabited the middle. The man she loved at that time. The man she treated badly at this time. Remez's letter reveals just how badly she treated Morris and how far their marriage had deteriorated. You're impressed by Zalman. I dare say Zalman has a wife that loves him. Gershon has a wife that ignores him. True, Gershon is a very difficult person, but you made him what he is today. Before you were famous, it wasn't any better. You are ready, so you say, to give your entire life to Gershon for the sake of the children. Why do you make yourself ridiculous, Chaya? What kind of atmosphere can there be in the home when the father comes home and she rests on one sofa and he on the other? About Morris, he continued, don't forget, in the nice words Gershon said to you, there's more love and devotion than in the beautiful phrases your friends give you. Remez's solicitousness toward Morris appears strange, if not hypocritical, considering his own marriage and long-standing affair with Gusta Strumpf, who gave birth to a son, generally known to be his. And while supposedly defending Morris, he also dwelled martyr-like on his personal feelings. I'll suffer. I'm used to suffering. You ran away with him. Golda's response, if any, remains unknown. Despite the reprimands from Remez in the fall of 1931, she finally agreed to leave her family again and go to the States for another fundraising campaign. Shazad journeyed there shortly afterward on the same mission. Aside from working for the campaign, he would attend Columbia University in New York for additional advanced study. Golda arrived in New York aboard the SS Europa on October 13th, traveling as she had earlier on her Government of Palestine passport. She couldn't have chosen a worse time. The Great Depression that struck the city and the country shortly after she left 2 years earlier had changed the face of America. More than 13 million people had lost their jobs, and more than 10,000 banks failed. In New York City, where soup kitchen lines snaked around street corners, almost 2 million people received some form of public welfare. The Jewish community everywhere was hit hard, with thousands of new requests for help pouring into charities at the very moment that hospitals, nursing homes, orphanages, and other services had to close for lack of funds. As jobs became scarce, anti-Semitism, always brewing beneath the surface, became blatant. Jews need not apply signs appeared on storefronts and accompanied want ads. Businesses and law firms shut their doors so firmly against Jews that men in well-tailored suits and ties could be seen shuffling on bread lines. They don't accept Jews into colleges, Golda reported home. And even when they do, what kind of work will Jewish graduates find? Membership in Zionist institutions plummeted. The Zionist Organization of America, which had topped 100,000 members after the Balfour Declaration in 1917, dropped to little more than 8,000 by the 1930s. And Hadassah would reach a low of 23,349 members. Beset by economic miseries, American Jews did not have money to spend on membership dues or their minds set on Zionist fantasies. In this environment, Golda plunged into her fundraising tasks for the Gewerkschaften and other labor campaigns, and especially for the pioneer women, trying to wear blinders to the economic realities around her. She based herself in the small, cluttered Pioneer Women's Office at 1133 Broadway in Manhattan's Garment District, but spent the next months traveling. A sample from her 1932 tour schedule in the Pioneer Women's Files tells the story. Kansas City, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 19th to 22nd January. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Sunday, Monday, 24th to 25th January. Dallas, Texas, Wednesday, Thursday, 27th to 28th January. San Antonio, Texas, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 29th to 31st January. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Petaluma, Wednesday till Sunday, 3rd to 14th February. Seattle, Washington, 16th to 17th February. Calgary, Friday, 19th February. Edmonton, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 20th to 22nd February. Saskatoon, Wednesday, 24th February. The tour continues with the same packed days to Winnipeg, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Sioux City, Omaha, Iowa City, Cleveland, Columbus, Detroit, Toronto, and Hamilton, ending in Pittsburgh on April 3rd. Not really ending, because on April 14th, the women's organization held a reception for her at the Hotel Pennsylvania in Manhattan. Another occasion for her to speak and for them to raise money. And a few weeks later, donning her hat as a representative of the Histadrut, she appeared in Philadelphia before a conference of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, ILGWU, attended by 150 delegates and almost 3,000 visitors. Reporting on the event, DeVar noted with pride that May 3rd was a big day at the conference because Norman Thomas, leader of the American Socialist Party, addressed the gathering, and so did the Histadrut's own Golda Meirson. The convention responded enthusiastically to Golda, who spoke in Yiddish and English, the newspaper related, and afterward the delegates voted unanimously to actively support the work of the Histadrut. It was an extraordinary commitment by the Union to labor Zionism and a tribute to Golda, given the strains of the Depression. Membership in the ILGWU had fallen from 120,000 in 1928 to 33,000 in 1932. For Golda, it marked the beginning of a lifetime love fest with American labor unions. Regardless of that success, the grueling pace of travels continued in May, this time to the East Coast. From Boston, she appeared at the nearby cities of Dorchester, Roxbury, and Chelsea, where she spoke in the name of the Histadrut. In New Haven, in addition to appearing at the Pioneer Women's Club, she met with Hadassah women to familiarize them with her group's work. In Baltimore, she added a Zionist youth group to her other meetings and attended a banquet in her honor. Cleveland, Detroit, Toronto, and Buffalo appeared on her schedule for the remainder of the month. You undoubtedly already know the lot of an emissary, she wrote to her comrades in the Women Workers' Council back home. 3 or 4 meetings in the course of a day, talks until the early morning hours, day after day, and week after week. She didn't know whether she had aged since her last visit to America. She wrote sardonically she was only 34, or whether the work had actually become harder, but the past months had depleted her strength. She hesitated to commit herself to a longer stay, although the Pioneer women very much wanted her to continue. By June, she no longer had a choice. An ominous telegram arrived from Morris. Sarah, ill. Suggest you return. The mysterious kidney disease had progressed to the point that the child could no longer eat, and her face had swollen out of shape. Family lore has it that Golda hurried home frantically, and in the course of some weeks, she and Morris made the agonizing decision for her to take Sarah to America for medical treatment, although the pediatrician warned that the little girl was too sick to travel and might die on the way. In this memory, Golda then requested that she be sent as an emissary to the Pioneer women in America so that she might carry out her plans for her daughter. In reality, Golda seems to have decided quickly that she would go home to get her children and return to the States with both of them, so that Sarah could receive expert care and she could continue the work she had begun with the American women. The knowledge that she will remain... with us gave great pleasure to all the Havarot and the entire movement. The Pioneer women wrote to the Women Workers' Council before Golda even left the States. She arrived in Tel Aviv in early July. Though worried about her daughter, she quickly got back into the whirl of Yishuv activity after feeling out of the mainstream in America, attending executive meetings of the Histadrut and Women Workers' Council. She reported to the council with satisfaction that the Pioneer women had formed 13 new youth clubs and grown its membership, and even in the hard situation in the States, had matched the sum raised the previous year. She also notified the women that the Pioneer women had prevailed on her to become national secretary of the organization. Golda needed the salaried position of secretary, comparable to executive director, to help support her and the children in America. As a Histadrut emissary, she had received only minimal pay, covering basic expenses. Morris would remain behind. He had been living again in Jerusalem, where he ran a bookstore on Jaffa Road, with money raised by Shayna's husband, Shammai. The children who lived with him during Golda's most recent American stay loved to visit the store and receive gifts of new books from their father. Eventually, it would fail, as did most of his enterprises, this time due to theft by a dishonest clerk, and, more likely, Morris's lack of business acumen. Some months after Golda and the children left, he moved into the home of Baruch Zuckerman, head of Poly Zion in America, with whom Golda had worked closely. The Zuckermans immigrated to Jerusalem in the fall of 1932, but Zuckerman still spent most of his time on party activities outside the country. Everyone thought Morris Meyerson was our father because our father was never home, recalled Nomi Zuckerman, the younger of his two daughters. To her, Morris would always be a kind, gentle human being who knew everything in the world, a tragic, lonely figure. The 2-week voyage to the United States gave Golda her first extended, uninterrupted time with the children in years. Following the route she had taken previously, they boarded their ship, the SS Bremen, at Cherbourg, France. In their small tourist-class cabin, she slept on a deck chair while the children used the bunks. During the day, she played shuffleboard with Menachem, or read and sang to both children. Sarah might have been too ill to fully appreciate the precious hours with her mother, unhindered by meetings or speeches. But for 8-year-old Menachem, the journey stood out as an idyllic moment in time that would rarely be duplicated. They disembarked in New York on August 27, 1932, and headed directly to the spacious Brooklyn apartment of Fanny and Jacob Goodman, where they were to live for the next year. Jacob Goodman had run a restaurant that became a hangout for writers and musicians during Golda's earlier American years. He and Fanny were part of her close circle of Poly Zion Havarim, comrades who became extended family to her and her children. Golda arranged to have Sarah enter Beth Israel Hospital on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And within 6 weeks, the child who had been close to death was miraculously cured. Although she had kidney problems, the nature of her illness had been misdiagnosed, and with proper food and treatment, she left the hospital in perfect health, Golda wrote to Morris. But the children's ordeal was just beginning. They spoke little English, lived in unfamiliar surroundings with a family they barely knew, and saw their mother disappear, sometimes all day and far into the night, when she attended meetings, at times for weeks or even months, when she traveled the country raising money. It was not a good time, Sarah said with rueful understatement. During their first week of school, she and Menachem both entered the first grade in a local public school. Golda helped the children by sitting in class with them, translating the teacher's words into Hebrew. In Tel Aviv, she and Morris had spoken English to each other, and Yiddish to the children, so that they would know that language along with the Hebrew they would pick up automatically. When their English improved in America, she spoke to them only in Hebrew, to ensure that they did not forget that language. Once Golda launched into her frenetic work schedule, the children went wild. Menachem especially vented his rage at his mother by quarreling constantly with her, at one point furiously piling up all the furniture against the door to his room, locking himself in and her out. After almost a year at the Goodmans, the family moved to Hamilton Street in Manhattan, to stay with Malka Shankman, a divorcee, and her son. Menachem remembered attending PS 192 with his sister, and feeling that, abandoned as they were by their mother, he had to be the big brother to Sarah. That didn't stop him, however, from being jealous of Sarah, who endeared herself to others, and tormenting her because of his rage at Golda. They did have some good experiences in the States. When she could, Golda took them to movies and museums, or to visit relatives. Her younger sister, Clara, lived in Bridgeport, Connecticut, a fairly short train ride from New York. She had married a man she met at the University of Wisconsin, Fred Stern, and had a young son, Daniel David. Sharp and caustic, Fred was a communist, vehemently opposed to all forms of nationalism. He informed Golda, on their first meeting, 2 years earlier, that he considered Zionism a reactionary movement. Clara, as feisty and opinionated as her two older sisters, had announced that she would not join the family in Eretz Israel. As it happened, she did not even visit that land until 1950, when she would see her ill mother for the first time in 25 years. But then her life had been overwhelmed with pain. Her son died at the age of 18, and her husband, always bitter, suffered a severe illness that caused him to lose a leg and remain bedridden for years. But in 1932, when Menachem and Sarah visited their Aunt Zipka, the family still used her Yiddish name. The sorrows lay in the future, and Clara and Fred welcomed them cordially. Morris's family in Philadelphia also greeted them with affection. They met their grandmother, Morris's mother, Shifra, for the first time. In earlier days, she had disliked the Mabovich family and Golda, but she had adjusted to the marriage and her son's move to Palestine. Most likely, she and the other family members knew nothing about the difficulties between Morris and Golda. The children also met Morris's sister, Ray, and her husband, Lou Brodo. They had reared Marcella, the daughter of Ray's deceased sister, Sarah, for 6 years, until her father, Leon Skoss, remarried, and could care for her. It comforted the children to have relatives they could visit, yet their abiding memory of those years in America was of loneliness. We were always lonesome for Mother, because we saw very little of her, Sarah said. Golda's lasting memory was of the smell of railway stations and the sound of my own voice. The steady stream of long-distance railway travel did not begin immediately, however. For much of the first year, she worked primarily out of the Pioneer Women's Office, which had moved a few blocks to 1225 Broadway, taking trips out of town to give lectures, attend meetings, or organize the perennial bazaars, raffles, and dances that supplied the bread and butter of money raising. On a trip to Toronto at the end of October, she was officially elected to her position as National Secretary at the Pioneer Women's 4th Biennial Convention. During those autumn months, one of the most beautiful seasons in New York, she also found time to be with Shazar, who was still studying at Columbia. but by Thanksgiving he had returned to Tel Aviv while his wife Rachel came to join Golda as an emissary in America. Good, kind, trusting Rachel wrote glowingly to her husband about Golda a month after her arrival. It may be redundant to tell you what a powerful impression Golda's work has made on me now that I see it up close. I went with her to several meetings in which she participated, and I simply do not remember when I've received such an impression of a public leader. Then with sympathy. In general, she has many difficulties in her life, and that is crystal clear. Was she referring to Golda's difficulties with her husband, her unhappy children, or the totality of her private life, compared with her public one? She assumed Shazar would know. In the same letter, she alluded to Golda's continued lack of confidence in her Hebrew-speaking abilities. Rachel accepted an invitation to speak at a forthcoming celebration of the working woman in the land of Israel, to be held by an American cultural organization that promoted Hebrew. Golda refused, because she still did not feel competent in the language. Golda and Rachel divided the work for the pioneer women between them. For the time being, Golda would concentrate on New York and surrounding regions, and Rachel would travel to the more distant places. In a return letter, Shazar advised Rachel to stay only in hotels, even though she didn't like hotels, because they are less worrying than being a guest in the homes of the Havarot. In fact, emissaries like Rachel and Golda, who had not reached Shazar's level of eminence, had little say in the matter of their lodging. Money was scarce, and the pioneer women members insisted on playing hosts. Golda almost always stayed in members' homes on short or long trips. When she didn't, the Havarot noticed and commented. Norma Saltz was a young girl when Golda visited the Pioneer Women's Group in Buffalo, New York, on May 12, 1931. Golda slept in my bed that night, Saltz recalled, remembering the excitement of the event. So many women across the country can say the same thing. But the following year, when Golda came to Buffalo again, she stayed at a hotel. What a grumbling went on because of this. How could she spend the money? How will we get her from the hotel? Decades later, in 1975, Saltz traveled to Israel on the same plane as Golda. Receiving permission to speak to the then-retired Prime Minister, she told Golda about the scandal that had erupted when she stayed at the Hotel Lafayette in Buffalo in 1932. The bill had come to $7. The women accused you of squandering the funds, she said, and they both laughed. It was an insignificant sum in 1975, but for American women prying out nickels and dimes for the cause in the depressed 1930s, $7 spent on a